Hi everyone, Monica Weston here from SCORE. We're going to give people just another minute or two to join, and then I'll do an official introduction.
What's going on in the past? By Monday, I won't remember. Yeah. Probably just unplugged, you know, because they moved the thing back and forth, but I didn't have the nerve to. Yeah, schedule us for a meeting in here. Yeah, so yeah, if there's, you can always take your laptop. But, so I'm staying down. I don't have to. If it's recorded, I'll forward the URL. The other one that I did for lunch after lunch that was recorded, I'll forward that to the Yeah. I still didn't get around to it. Right, so.
All right, I think we're starting to get a quorum, so we will go ahead and get started. Before I introduce our speakers and talk a little bit about how this webinar will go, I have just a few kind of logistics and housekeeping items. First, we're going to do all the Q&A at the end. This webinar will be recorded and sent out via the Carl listserv. So if you have any questions during the actual presentations that you want to make sure get out, you can add them to the chat, which you'll see in the toolbar of your Zoom. Otherwise, just hold your questions to the end, and I'll stop recording, and then we'll do all the Q&A together. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask everyone to mute themselves, except for the presenters, while the presentations are happening. And what you'll do to mute is just go to the bottom left of your toolbar, and you'll see a little mic button, and make sure that that's muted. In the past, we've had some loud typers, so I'd like this to be a very nice, clean recording. So with that being done, this is my official welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. I'm Monica Weston from the California Digital Library, and I'm the chair-elect of SCORE this year. SCORE is the California Academic and Research Library's scholarly communication and open resources for education interest group. And this is our spring webinar on OA Monograph initiatives. Presenting today are Rachel Sandberg, UC Berkeley's Scholarly Communication Officer, and Mark Eddington, Director of the Amherst College Press, based in the Amherst College Library. Each of the presenters will speak for, I think, about 15 to 20 minutes. And again, we'll hold all the Q&A until the end, but if you have a question at any point, put it into chat and we'll make sure to address it at the end. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and turn it over to our first presenter.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Sandberg. And let's see, can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So okay. So I'm Rachel Sandberg. I'm the Scholarly Communication Officer at UC Berkeley. And thank you, Monica, for asking both Mark and me to speak about open access book initiatives. I know it was framed as monograph initiatives, but I think there's a strategic reason why I'd like to describe it for everyone today as book initiatives. Because I think that what we'll be able to see today is that we can get a lot of things going, and that we need to also invest in sustainability and in engaging a community to take advantage of various initiatives. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background on what Berkeley has done or has been doing regarding open access efforts surrounding books or monographs. Now, I started the ScholComm program here just about 2 years ago, but there were already some efforts underway here related to open access books. So for example, we've been supporting OA books through investments in Knowledge Unlatched, more recently through Langside Press. We're members of Open Library of the Humanities, HathiTrust, JSTOR Open Access Books, Open Book Publishers. So when we talk about OA book initiatives, it's not like this is something very new. We've been interested in supporting the dissemination of books in an open environment for quite some time. But the particular programs that we've developed over the past 2 years have been a little more targeted in engaging our specific user community. So I call this sort of expanding the realm. And in some ways it could be seen as focusing the realm to the Berkeley community and then enabling the creation of Berkeley authored materials that could then be made available to the rest of the universe and benefit a much wider audience. So I'll give you some examples of what we've been doing to expand the realm. One of the first things I did when I started here was to create a comprehensive scholarly communication services website, which is lib.berkeley.edu/scholcom. And we have a lot of information here, particularly under the scholarly publishing portal, regarding all aspects of scholarly communication, and particularly around what all of our open access initiatives are and the ways that we support OA publishing and OA book publishing in particular. So this was one vehicle to kind of let the campus and the world know that we're focused on these issues and we're investing in programs to advance what's been going on here so far. The other programmatic initiative that I invested in is a continuation of something that we had already been doing under what's called the Berkeley Research Impact Initiative, or BRI. So the Berkeley Research Impact Initiative is our now close to 10-year-old program that is a subvention fund for open access publishing. To date, we've largely funded through subvention funding the article processing charges for open access journal publications. We have also provided funding to open access journals who accrue costs themselves in being able to publish through eScholarship, which is the UC system-wide institutional repository. So for example, we would also fund publishers who are publishing journals for their related editing costs if they're going to be making their journal available through eScholarship. What we did in May, though, was expand this BRI program to also cover subvention funding for OA monographs. Now, OA monographs are sort of still the Wild West in terms of what subvention funding might look like. And just to make sure we're all on the same page when I'm talking about subvention funding, it's essentially an article processing charge or a book processing charge that would then be funded by a library or another organization rather than billing the author directly. So in the context of open access books, a university press might pass on the cost of publishing an open access book directly to the author. We would then pay that cost on the author's behalf, the same way that we would for a fully open access journal. We don't fund hybrid journals. So for close to 10 years, we've been funding journals and journal publishing through the BRI program, and we pay up to $2,500 for articles or chapters. We added scholarly books to that in May, and we'll pay up to $7,500 in subvention funding for that. Now, many university presses who are involved in making OA books available or in publishing open access monographs don't quite know exactly yet how much a subvention fee might look like. How much should a book processing charge actually be for an open access monograph? I'm sure folks are familiar with the work being done by AAU and AUC around kind of figuring out what a subvention fee might look like. Potentially, it can mean investing $15,000 in a book or anywhere up to $35,000. What we do know is that for UC Press's Luminos program, their subvention fees are $7,500. They will charge an author $7,500 in a book processing charge to cover some of UC Press's incurred costs in making that book available. And so we use that as the baseline for what our program would be able to cover. And for this first year, we've set aside the equivalent of 3 OA monographs. We would fund up to 3 OA monographs at the up to $7,500 price point to incentivize our campus authors to publish an open access monograph. Now, so far, we've only set up, this would work on a reimbursement basis for most publishers, in that the author would have to pay the subvention fee and then we would reimburse them up to $7,500. But because we are Luminos members, we were able to set up a prepayment system with Luminos such that if our authors publish that OA book with UC Press's Luminos program, we will prepay that up to $7,500 so that it doesn't have to come out of an author's pocket and then have them wait for reimbursement. We have not set up any other kinds of prepayment situations yet because frankly, we're still in the experimental phase of how this program will work when it comes to OA monographs. In fact, in the first year, we have not funded a single OA monograph. And I think part of that is due to really just kind of rolling out the details, but also having only limited outreach so far. So we certainly had a blog post announcing our new program, and we have marketing materials that we distribute at events about our program. And when we're working with faculty authors on other aspects of their scholarship, we are able to communicate about the program. But we haven't solved yet how to be at a point of need with the faculty yet. I think in part because we haven't worked directly with publishers about our program yet. As I mentioned, we have worked with Luminos, and in fact, Luminos had already published 2 OA books by UC Berkeley authors before we started our subvention program. So those were already in the pipeline before we could offer to reimburse or prepay for the faculty authors. But the reality is there just aren't that many faculty authors engaging with UC Press's Luminos program from UC Berkeley in any given year to publish an OA monograph. So we haven't cracked the nut yet of how to really get into the pipeline and how to establish ourselves in the pipeline to both impress upon authors about the opportunity to publish an OA monograph and then advise them that we have this program to be able to support them. But as I mentioned, the key area I think for us is to start the outreach process to other publishers to let them know about our program. I think the time is really ripe for us to do that now that we've kind of set the money aside and are starting to engage in more conversations. What I wanted to kind of highlight here, though, is that there are other ways to support open access monographs in addition to just offering a subvention fund. So for example, we support a lot of DIY OA monographs through the eScholarship repository. One that I'll point out in particular that we recently worked on was by a former provost of the entire UCOP, a UCOP provost for the UC system, who wrote an 800-page work on the history of the University of California, all of the campuses, and how the University of California has been able to maintain academic quality, with the idea that this could be used by institutions globally who are looking to set up institutes for higher education. And so when he came to us looking for support for publishing his own, no university press imprint OA monograph, he needed quite a large array of services. He needed support for dealing with copyright and permissions for images he was using in publication. He needed to figure out some way or process or service to provide copy editing. He needed to coordinate peer review. The material needed to be exported into various formats for online distribution. We had to solve international sales channels, how to get the book listed in the directory of open access books, make sure that there were OCLC records for discoverability, and then help work with him around publicity for the book. Actually, the image you see here was an event we held in February in which he was able to speak to a large audience on this campus about the book and what it means for higher education and supporting higher education globally. But all of these were services that we needed to figure out how we could support him in the course of a DIY OA monograph production. Our library is not a publisher. We don't have a publishing unit. And yet if we want to be able to support OA monographs, we've got to figure out which of these services we can provide. And actually we provided all of these, but is that a scalable model? Likely not. Another way that we're supporting OA books, and this is why I've called this presentation OA books and not necessarily OA monographs, is we're supporting the creation of open educational resources or open textbooks. And we've been doing that through a grant program that I started this year that provides funding to faculty members or instructors who wish to either adopt, which no one chose to do, or create, which everyone chose to do, their own open textbooks. And we provide the grant to help them not just with editing services and grad students to do creation and review, but also any sort of ancillary transition support that they need in really converting their course to be based around an open textbook. So our grants for creation were $5,000 grants. We had 7 faculty members who participated this year who are publishing 9 open textbooks, some of which will start to be rolled out this summer and this fall. They are using a number of different platforms to be able to make these open textbooks available. Some are using Jupyter Notebooks, and the book will live in GitBooks online. Some are using LaTeX and then exporting that to WordPress or other formats. So there are a variety of hosting tools that are needed in order to support the open textbooks. As we started this program, we discovered that faculty really need at least some reliable platform to have in the can that they could use if we're going to be offering services around supporting the creation of open textbooks. Then we've got to, or open educational resources, we've got to think about what kinds of support platforms we can provide. And so we've licensed Pressbooks EDU as an institutional instance of Pressbooks and have created openbooks.berkeley.edu as a hub site. Anyone now with a Berkeley email address can create an open book and publish it through Pressbooks online, and that will be hosted for them, and we are covering those costs. In addition, if they create a book that's for a class and they use Pressbooks, we will feature it on our openbooks.berkeley.edu hub site. We've also developed guidelines, because if you're going to start a program like this, where you are offering a service and tools for users to create their own open books, you've got to be able to give them guidance and help them understand what their rights and roles and responsibilities are. So we actually created a Pressbook on how to use our Pressbooks platform. Some observations about the kinds of programs we've implemented so far. I sort of want to bring bees to the flowers, but we have some lessons that we've learned, which is it's not just about providing the fee, the subvention fee, or the grant to create an open book, but it's also the service you provide in support of authors being able to create. Not everyone has access to a university press's suite of editing and other services, and so there really is in order to have a comprehensive program, we see a need for authoring and publishing tools and related services to support the creation and dissemination. We also have learned that we really need to reach authors at point of need. So far, when we are aware of projects that our authors are working on, we're able to intervene and let them know about what we have, but we need to better integrate ourselves into the entire publishing workflow, which is a stretch for our library because we have not traditionally been in the publishing business. We're not traditionally in the monograph publishing process for our faculty authors. And so lastly, we move on from it not just being the service, but also understanding that it's the entire publishing community awareness, the awareness of our authors, and also university presses and other publishers who know about the support and other services that we can provide. And so I know we're going to answer questions at the end, but I wanted to just let you know about a few ways to get in touch with us. We have an email address. We have a Twitter handle, which I would recommend following to see everything that we're doing in this space. And you can also check out our website that I mentioned that details all of our programs. So thanks very much.
Okay. Wow, that's incredible. Thanks, Rachel. And I'm really excited to follow that because Rachel has been building a program from the library side, and I'm building a program from the publishing side, although I'm building a publishing program from within a library. So we'll have some interesting differences of perspective, but we're also doing, I think, some interesting things together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat box a link to the presentation that I'm about to give, just in case anybody wants to have access to it later, and I'm going to turn off my own video to maybe help the processing power on my little machine and share my screen with you. So this is the screen I'm hoping you're going to see. Let's see. So I hope what you're seeing right now is a Prezi, if it comes up here.
I'm currently seeing your desktop.
Are you? Okay, hang on. Do you see a blank screen?
I'm seeing a sort of Finder file with the Prezi.
Oh, you are? Okay, hang on. Hang on, darn it. Okay, let's see if we can get this right. There we go. How about a white screen now?
Yes, we're in business.
Great, okay. So I have exactly 20 minutes to tell you what I'm up to. So I'm gonna try to do all of these things in 20 minutes. I'm going to say what I started doing here at Amherst and why, what I've ended up doing now, and what we're doing in another institution called Lever Press, and really what our theory of change is for open access monograph publishing, at least one part of it. And finally, I'm going to say a little bit about what the risks I think are that we face, and maybe more accurately, the huge risks that we're facing and the kinds of changes that we're trying to make. So first of all, here's some numbers that librarians are going to be familiar with. The thing I want you to notice is that $58.76 average cost of a monograph back in 2002, 2003, which has risen now to $92.73 at the most recent report we have. And if we just plot that on a graph, it looks like this. Here's the $58.76 back in 02, 03, which rose to $92.73. But if we had plotted that against the consumer price index, it would only have gone up 33.6%. In fact, it went up almost 60%. So the point of this slide is very simply, our costs are rising a lot faster than our revenues. Unless your library's budget is rising at twice the rate of inflation, you're not keeping pace even with book prices, and this isn't taking into account journal prices. But here's the other part of this story. This is data from my own institution here at Amherst College, and what it shows is the borrowing of the materials that we buy by our faculty, our students, and the 5 colleges consortium that we're a part of. And this is just a steady downward slope. So the question that we're facing as a liberal arts college is, we're spending more and more for stuff that we're using less and less. And why should we be doing that? What's the problem here? And we think that maybe part of the problem is described in this picture. Some of you might have gone to colleges like this, or some of you might be in one now, but we know this about these colleges. They're almost exclusively undergraduate. There's a tradition of direct faculty instruction. There are no TFs. There's a phenomenon about a general or distribution requirement and interdisciplinary openness. But here's the thing, our faculty are highly productive. 7% of the American professoriate live in American liberal arts colleges, but they produce about 14% of the books that are published by university presses. So we know that our faculty hit above their weight, but here's the thing. There are 4,000 roughly institutions of higher education in the US. Only 500 of them are liberal arts colleges. But if you think about this in terms of university presses, there are 137 university presses that live in large Research One institutions and only 2 that live in liberal arts colleges. So maybe that has something to do with why it is the materials being produced by this system are being used less and less by institutions like mine. Maybe the perspective on what scholarship is shaped by where these presses live in terms of their institutional home. So 4 years ago and a little bit more, I came to Amherst College and I work in the library here. And when I go out of my office and pull books off the shelves, I see things like this, which probably you have in books in your libraries too. These are the tombstones that mark where we buried the money that people gave us to buy books. And it's really kind that these people gave us this money. They gave it to us because we are a charitable institution, and we when they give us money, they get a tax exemption. But when we buy the books, they come to us wrapped up in a certain set of rights over which we get no control. And if you think about that a little bit, you realize that that's kind of odd, because libraries are the chief provider of revenue in this system, but they actually have extremely little say over the nature of the product that's produced. So the question that we started wrestling with was, well, what if we use the money to form our own press? And we would be able to decide what are the rights under which the things that we produce are released into the world. So we decided we would use a tiny bit of the funding available to the Amherst College Library to create a press that would be peer-reviewed, like any scholarly press is, but would be open access. We would make sure that everything we published was available on an open access license. We would be focused in our editorial program on the liberal arts, on things that scholars in our institutions are interested in or produce, and we'd be a digital first press. That doesn't mean we don't print books. We do print books. We print everything that we publish, but we think first of the digital instance of the book we're going to publish because we're an open access press. So that's how we started. We're a member of a thing called the Oberlin Group. The Oberlin Group is 80 libraries that live in liberal arts colleges all across America from coast to coast. And we began having conversations with some of the other libraries in the Oberlin Group about what we were doing and how we could try to scale this idea across a larger number of institutions. We knew that we could not ourselves have the capacity to expand rapidly enough to do the production side of this, so we went and made a partnership with our colleagues at the University of Michigan Press, which, as many of you know, are kind of a leader in open access publishing, both in journals and in monographs. And our partnership together with the Oberlin Group is what led to the creation of something called the Lever Press. So we took this little idea that we started at Amherst, we went out on the road and talked to lots and lots of librarians and presidents and provosts and deans, and we said, look, we don't need your whole acquisition budget. All we need is 0.5% of what you spend for 5 years for a pilot run. And I'm happy to report that what we now have is a group of institutions, 54 in all, that have given us a 5-year budget of $1.5 million. They serve about 4,000 faculty members. We're not going to just publish them, but they are the first group that we have to draw on and our sort of constituents to think of in terms of like series editors or people who can help shape our output. Our target for our pilot is 60 titles. And just to be really clear about what's different about this as opposed to some of the other open access initiatives Rachel talked about, the first thing is we're building our work on the basis of Fulcrum, which is a digital publishing system being built by Michigan on the basis of $2 million from the Mellon Foundation. And it's a digital publishing platform built on the back of Fedora. Some of you will know Fedora, an open source architecture for digital asset management. As I said, we're 60 total titles in our pilot, 50 of which are traditional text and image sort of things, 10 of which are more in the digital humanities field that we're really sort of right now trying to acquire those titles. We're coming out at an average cost per title of about $17,000. And if you know the Mellon study or the Emory study or the Michigan study about monograph cost, you know that that's below average. The average tends to be more like about $22,000. But what's different about us distinctly is the libraries that invest in us actually govern our press. They are the board. The 54 institutions elect a 12-member board, the library directors from around our institutions, who actually meet every month, and I report to them as a group. They're managing us and making sure that we stay honest to our business principles. And like any other scholarly press, we have an editorial board, but they're drawn not just from one sponsoring institution, they're drawn from 12 different institutions around our group as well. And one of those people who sits on that board is a member of the governing group. So the libraries really have an important role here in governing what this press does. And that makes us pretty different from a typical press opening up an open access pathway. Okay, that's the good news. Now here's the problem. We just know that open access has a reputation problem. And any of you on this call are probably familiar with this as well. Anytime scholarly communication winds up in The Economist or in the New York Times or in the New Yorker, we know that something is happening that we need to pay attention to. And what's happening is there's this general sort of reputation that open access has gained for being poorly peer reviewed. Now, let's just say right now, if you're Elsevier, you have 6.1 billion reasons to make that reputation stick every year. Because if open access becomes the norm in the way scholarly communication happens, your business model is in real trouble. So what we have to say, and say clearly, is that this is just false. There's no relationship between the scholarly quality of a work and the way in which it's released into the world. But to make that argument, we have some work to do. Right now, we're kind of living in a world where a lot of the people sort of outside of academia are a little bit confused about what quality information is. And there is this sense that the stuff that we publish isn't in any significant way different from the other stuff that's out there. So this doesn't just matter to open access publishers. This actually matters to all scholarly publishers. We have to be clearer about what we mean when we say something is peer reviewed. And we think the best fix about this is simply transparency. So if you go back 18 years to a meeting in Tempe, organized by the Association of Universities, AAU, and the Association of Research Libraries, the so-called Tempe meeting, you come out with the Tempe principles. And one of them is this, The system of scholarly publication must continue to include processes for evaluating the quality of scholarly work. Okay, we know what that is. That's peer review. And every publication should provide the reader with information about the evaluation the work has undergone. Okay, well, you know, how do we do that? We actually don't have any systematic way of sharing that information with people. The traditional way you do it in Monograph world is in the second to last paragraph in your acknowledgments at the front of the book, you say, I would also like to acknowledge the contributions of 3 anonymous reviewers who helped immensely with their critique of my work. But that's not a system, that's a culture, that's a set of manners. We need to do something better. Here's what you get if you search for a guy named Mark Eddington in the Amherst College Library. In our catalog, you're going to come up with these titles, and you can even filter this in terms of peer-reviewed work. You see that little filter right here, kindly provided by the good people at EBSCO. But here's what I can tell you. This work and this work, the top and bottom things that you see here, are actually works by me, and neither of them were peer-reviewed. So we have a problem here. Our libraries are buying systems that are purporting to offer to our patrons a clear way of distinguishing peer-reviewed scholarship, but in fact, they're not doing that. And I can explain why if you're interested when we get to questions. So we need to figure out a clear way to do signaling about peer review. We have figured this out when it comes to the matter of rights. We know that the way we used to do this was by putting up a copyright notice. And now we do this thing. We use the wonderful little Creative Commons buttons to let people know what are the ways in which they can use the works that are in their hands. And everybody on this call is also going to know those buttons actually relate to pretty clear language. There's the sort of human readable language, and then there's the language for lawyers that has been provided by the Creative Commons folks. And it's pretty detailed about what those buttons actually give you the rights to do. But we don't have any way yet to do this in the world of review, and that's the problem. So how do we solve this from the perspective of an open access publisher? My colleagues around the table of the editorial board of Lever Press came at this problem head on, and their first answer was, we actually have to solve the problem of defining our terms when it comes to peer review. That thing that the Creative Commons folks did, writing the language of the license, we have to do that in describing what peer review is. So that's in fact what they did. They created a very clear statement defining what we mean when we say everything we do is peer reviewed. And this is available right on the Lever Press website. You'll also find it on the Amherst College Press website. We just say it explicitly. This is what we mean when we say it. And we're going to tell you, in the case of everything we publish, exactly how we reviewed that work. But now we have to figure out, how are we going to get other people to do this? What's our theory of change in moving this needle? We could go to a conference a week and speak at a panel a week on the need for doing this. That would maybe take me 10 years and 520 conferences, and my chances of success would be pretty low. We could do this at our own press, and we're actually doing this, but you know, to have import or prestige in this world takes some time, like measured in years. So that's probably maybe a 50-50 chance of success. Or we could try to gather a group of stakeholders who are really kind of the thinkers in this field, both publishers and librarians, and hand the work to them. And that would take less than 10 years and might have a better chance of success. So guess what? That's what we did. We partnered with our friends at the MIT Press, an extremely good press, and we got some funding from the Open Society Foundations to pull together a group of thought leaders on this problem. And that's the risk. We sort of put 35 people in a room in January and handed this problem to them, not really knowing what the outcome was going to be. But what I can tell you is the outcome is at this website. And if you go to it, you'll find the final report pretty soon. Actually, it'll be up tomorrow, of this effort. What it says is, we have a way of signaling that we would like to suggest to the community of scholarly publishers and librarians and technologists who are going to be the ones who wire together the way we solve this problem. We think that nature has a kind of perfect form for collaborative work, and that form is a hexagon. So what we're suggesting is that we could create a signaling system that reflects the community work that peer review is. And I'm just going to give you some examples of ways that we've imagined implementing this system, and I'd be interested in hearing some reactions to this. So imagine that we would have a way of saying on the copyright page of a work that this is a peer-reviewed manuscript that was subjected to a single blind review by 3 reviewers. This is very typical in the world of scholarly monographs. This is pretty much what we do every day with the titles that we publish. Or imagine that we're talking about a journal article that comes to us as a manuscript that's reviewed double-blind by 2 reviewers, but also has a data set that we just put up in an open repository for open review. Or imagine a book that began as a peer-reviewed proposal that was double-blinded by 2 reviewers, and then became a manuscript that was single-blinded by 3 reviewers and was open reviewed. This would have applied to Kathleen Fitzpatrick's work on planned obsolescence. If you know that book, this is what such a system would have been like on that process. And we could say the same thing if the 2 review processes were done simultaneously. If we felt a need to show the difference between sequential and simultaneous reviews, we could do that with this system. The point is, a system like this would be modular because it could reflect the various objects that we review and the processes by which we review them. It could be extensible as we sort of begin to develop consensus about what objects and processes we peer review. It could be scalable for publishers like me that publish scores of works a year, or publishers that publish hundreds of journal articles a year. It could be the responsibility of the scholarly community to update, to refine, and to oversee. And finally, it would show that peer review is a work of the scholarly commons. And we think that's important. This is not just a function of the market. It's a thing that the commons of scholarship does together. So that's what I have to say. I did it in 17 minutes. Thank you so much for listening to what I have to offer. And these are the sort of websites that I worry about. The Amherst College Press is up there in the upper right-hand corner. You're going to find titles that we've already published there. Lever Press is down in the lower left-hand corner. And our first title will be appearing in October. And finally, the New Books Network is an initiative of the Amherst College Press. It's a library of 5,000 podcasted interviews with the authors of new scholarly works. It grows at the rate of about 100 new podcasts a month. And last year, in calendar 2017, we served almost 8 million individual downloads of those podcasts. So we're pretty excited about that. It's freely available. It's kind of part of our open access mission. And that's what I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you both so much. Those were fascinating presentations. I'm going to move to a final screen of my own, and then we will stop recording and go into a Q&A. So thank you to everyone who attended. Again, I'll stop recording just before the Q&A. I will be circulating this webinar via the SCORE listserv. And there's a URL there, or you could just Google SCORE Carl and you receive the listserv there, or read more about what our interest group does. At this point, I'm going to stop recording.